progress.
Good evening. We're going to call this meeting Monday, May 18th of the Oceanside Planning Commission. Can we stand, and Commissioner Ogden, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Planner, could you call roll, please?
Yes, I can, sir. Chair Morrissey,
Here.
Vice Chair Anthony. Here. Commissioner Redgate.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Ogden.
Here.
Commissioner Abril.
Here.
And Commissioner Dodds.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Do we have any communication on matters not on the agenda?
Chair Morrissey, we do not.
We do not. Okay. Could we have an approval of the minutes from the prior meeting? Could I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. Can I get a second, please? Second. Please vote.
Let the record show the motion passes 6 yes, 1 abstain.
Mary Sue.
Hold on one moment for me, thank you. Let's try that again, please, thank you. Chair Ogden, could you please vote again, please? All right, there we go. Let the record show the motion passes 5 yes, 2 abstain, Ogden and Dodds. Thank you.
Okay, I see nothing on the transportation items. Before we start our public hearings, I just want to welcome back Commissioner Ogden and Commissioner Dodds. So welcome back. Good to see you guys. Okay, public hearing item 4, consideration of an ordinance deferring implementation of the Affordable Homes Near Transit Act, SB 79, including exemptions, SB 79 ordinance, and the applicant is the City of Oceanside. And if we could have disclosures, please, with you, starting you, Commissioner Dodds.
Read staff report, also had a meeting with our city planner, and I'm familiar with SB 79.
Commissioner April.
I'm familiar with SB 79.
Thank you. Commissioner Redgate.
Hi, I went over staff reports, met with city planner, and did some research on SB 79.
Okay, same for me. Commissioner,
Also, same for me.
okay.
Staff reports, we had a staff briefing with city staff. I also had a Zoom call with folks in the community who were interested.
Had the same thing, went through the city provided last Friday, sitting through the same workshop that I think all the other planning commissioners sat by. I also have had extensive conversation with Mayor Sanchez. I've also talked to extensive conversation with Jimmy Figueroa, councilman, and also had email with Councilperson Eric Joyce as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Ogden.
Good
Go
evening,
ahead, Dane,
Chair.
go ahead.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Dane Thompson with the Planning Division, presenting the SB 79 phasing ordinance or implementation ordinance. SB 79, titled the Affordable Homes Near Transit Act, was signed into law in October of 2025 and is slated to become effective on July 1. SB 79 preempts local zoning restrictions, allowing low-rise and mid-rise housing within 1/2 mile of qualifying transit-oriented development, TOD stops, on sites zoned residential, commercial, or mixed use. Staff assumes that we have 7 such TOZ zones in the City of Oceanside, all surrounding our Sprinter Station. Here you can see on the map those 7 TOD zones, starting with the Oceanside Transit Center, Coast Highway, Crouch Street, El Camino Real, Rancho del Oro, College Boulevard, then ending at Melrose Drive. I want to point out that per statute, the MPO of the local region, in this case Sandag, is supposed to publish official maps. They have not yet published said maps, so we are going off of our best guess. These are our assumptions that we think Sandag will follow. So SB 79 grants local governments limited abilities to permanently exempt sites from that meet certain statutory criteria, defer implementation of SB 79 on other sites, and process a local TOD alternative plan, which could redistribute housing capacity within certain sites. But these are not requirements of the bill. SB 79 will go into effect on July 1. City doesn't have to do anything. Staff is recommending that we do an ordinance for the first 2 bullet points there, and then come back with a TOD alt plan in the future. So the ordinance before you tonight maximizes all potential exemptions, all potential deferments. Deferring and exempting as many sites as possible strives to reduce the potential impacts of SB 79 to the greatest extent possible. The alternative plan will take additional staff time, thus will come at a later date. SB 79 prescribes specific development standards for density, floor area ratio, or FAR, and height, as you can see in the table. Those limitations depend on tier of the TOD stop. There are 2 tiers in the statute. We're assuming that all of our stops are going to be tier 2. So that's the only one that's shown on the screen here. So within half mile, we're looking at densities up to 80 units an acre and heights up to 55 feet. And within a quarter mile, so a little bit closer, densities up to 100 units an acre and heights up to 65. Within 200 feet, there's what's known as an adjacency intensifier, but the radius for that is fairly small. All SB 9 projects over 10 units must provide minimum levels of below market rate units, meeting one of the following criteria on that list. However, if the city has a local inclusionary housing requirement that is greater than those percentages, that shall prevail. In our case, we have a local inclusionary requirement that's 15% low income or 15% lower or moderate for ownership projects. Because of these affordability components that are required, most SB 9 projects are going to be eligible for state density bonus. And with that, that entails concessions, waivers of development standards, and certain parking ratios. The one caveat there is that cities are not required to allow additional height through density bonus for SB 70 projects. SB 79 does not exempt projects from the discretionary review process, which is what most of you are familiar with. Discretionary permits are those that require decision-making bodies to exercise judgment prior to approval or denial, typically at a public hearing. That includes something like a development plan, a conditional use permit, tentative map, coastal permit. Those we can put conditions of approval on for some hours of operation, frontage improvements, and so on. Ministerial review is basically the opposite of that. That entails a staff level review of objective standards, which involve little or no personal judgment. That would be something like pulling a permit for a patio cover. So SB 79 does not exempt projects from the discretionary review process. However, SB 79 projects are eligible to utilize SB 35, which has its own affordability requirements as well as labor requirements, and it has some site qualifications that must be met. If projects meet all of those criteria, they can have ministerial approval. Just for the record, I am not aware of any projects in the City of Oceanside that have submitted as an SB 35 project. Projects that are not eligible for ministerial review must comply with CEQA. All projects in the coastal zone must comply with the Coastal Act and our local coastal program. Any housing that is demolished in conjunction with an SB 79 project must be replaced pursuant to SB 8 requirements for replacement housing. And most sites, just by definition, will be eligible for AB 2097, which allows significantly reduced parking. The next few slides will describe and help visualize via maps sites which are inherently ineligible for SB 79. We're calling exclusions. Sites that are allowed to be permanently considered ineligible for SB 79. We're calling exemptions, and those that are allowed to be made temporarily ineligible from SB 79. So going through the list, exclusions, those are the sites that are ineligible or inherently excluded from SB 79. Those are sites that are greater than 1/2 mile to a TOD stop, sites which are not zoned for residential, commercial, or mixed-use development, as shown in this map. This map is a little bit backwards compared to a lot of the other maps we're going to be looking at, where here the sites that would otherwise be eligible are shown in the pink color. So those are the sites that are zoned for residential, commercial, or mixed-use development. Sites that are uncolored are those that do not have the proper zone. So sites zoned for open space, institutional uses, industrial are shown uncolored here, are thus ineligible for SB 7. In addition, sites which require the demolition of rent-controlled units are also ineligible, so excluded. Those are the sites shown here. And sites within 100 feet of a wetland are considered undevelopable, at least those portions of the site that are within that buffer, shown in the blue on this map. And for the last exclusion, sites which are under a conservation easement or designated as a habitat preserve are undevelopable, as shown here in green. There is only one criteria for sites that can be exempted. So these are sites that the city can voluntarily exempt or make ineligible from SB 79 on a permanent basis via an ordinance such as the ordinance before you tonight. So that one criteria is just sites which do not have a walking path to a TOD stop of less than a mile. Here, I want to point out that there is no definition of walking path in the statute, so the city created our own definition. It's a lot of words on the screen, but essentially it just means a continuous path of sidewalk to the nearest TOD stop. So on the map, this shows those sites which are either over a mile walking distance or which don't have continuous sidewalk, as shown in green. As you can see, it's mostly in the Fire Mountain community, with a little bit in Loma Alta and in the Penny Hills area. Deferrals have quite a few criteria. There's some that the city doesn't meet, and the first 3 bullets there we do. We'll go over those in the maps. But deferrals are sites that are able to be temporarily made ineligible from SB 79. So that would be until 2032 at the latest. There's also the option of removing the deferral status on these sites via an alternative plan if we want that flexibility. So sites that permit 50% or more of SB 79 density and FAR, like the downtown or the Oceanside Boulevard mixed use sites via the Smart and Sustainable Corridor specific plan, have sufficient local capacity, therefore we can defer them if we wish. Those are the sites shown here in lime green. As you can see, downtown, Coast Highway Corridor, and the commercial or mixed use sites along Oceanside Boulevard are really where we're seeing sufficient local capacity to meet this criteria. The next one is similar. So these are sites that are within a TOD zone designated as low resource area by the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee that cumulatively allow at least 40% of SB 79 density across that entire zone. So the city has quite a few low resource areas, but the only TOD zone that meets the 40% threshold for capacity is the OTC zone. So that is shown here in blue. We're able to defer the entirety of that zone. In addition to that, sites which have a locally designated historic resource can be deferred. Those are all in the townsite neighborhood in the OTC zone, so those would be deferred either or. So everything that we just went over is kind of shown in this map, the combined map. It's a lot of colors, a lot going on, but the main purpose of it is to show how many sites are ineligible, either inherently ineligible, made permanently ineligible via this ordinance, or made temporarily. So the red is exempt sites, so those would be permanently ineligible due to lack of sidewalk or walking path. The pink sites are inherently excluded, so improper zoning would require demolition of rent-controlled units, and then, or habitat preserve or wetlands. And blue shows deferred sites, so temporary eligibility. This chart just shows that same map, but with numbers, in case that helps with visualization. So the green shows the default SB 79 capacity. These numbers don't show sites with incompatible zoning. They don't allow residential at all. But as you can see here, the OTC would be completely either deferred or exempted. So there's nothing shown purple, which is the capacity after exclusion, exemption, permit. So as you can see, there's a different impact to all the different zones, just depending on the context. You see complete deferment or exemption for the OTC zone. There's a handful which have limited impacts, limited reductions, like College and Melrose. There's some that have major reductions, Crouch and El Camino, some with significant, like around half reductions, Coast Highway and French Delaware. We kind of touched on an alternative plan earlier, but just to go into it further, SB 79 allows local governments to adopt alt plans to shift zone capacity within certain limitations. Those limitations are listed here, including no net loss in net capacity across the entire city. Individual sites cannot have density reduced beyond 50%, so a reduction of 50%, and can't be increased beyond 200% of SB 7 capacity. Individual zones, so the entire areas, cannot be reduced beyond 50%. SB 79 allows cities to direct more intensive growth, the alt plan allows cities to direct more intensive growth and more suitable areas while discouraging intensive development in less suitable areas. Alt plans cannot exempt sites inherently or just individually, and they cannot exempt whole neighborhoods. And like I said earlier, alt plans could reintroduce deferred sites if the city wants that additional flexibility to use the capacity of those sites. Here's kind of a visual of what that can look like under an alternative plan. So this map would show the default density under SB 79, where you have in the quarter-mile radius, densities of 100 units an acre, and then in the half-mile radius, 80 units an acre, which isn't a huge difference, about 20%. So there wouldn't be much change there. Here, this is really just showing that you could take some of that capacity from sites which the city deems appropriate and shift them onto other locations, as long as we have that no net loss condition satisfied. So here in this example, neighborhoods like South O and Seaside, we can take potential capacity and shift it into sites like the Coast Highway Corridor or the Down. And like I said earlier, this will come back before this commission if staff decides to go through with it. Staff finds that the ordinance is not subject to CEQA, as it's not a project, because it is organizational or administrative activity under the CEQA guide. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending City Council approval of subject phasing ordinance. That concludes my presentation. I'll be available for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dane. Any questions for Dane? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. Is there a due date for the alternative plan that y'all are working on then?
Commissioner Gonzalez, there isn't a statutory requirement that we have to meet, but right now we're just working as quickly as we can in the essence of.
Are there any other questions for Dane before we go to our public? I see nothing. Okay.
Oh, wait, did I? Yes, request to speak.
Commissioner Redgate.
I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for doing all of this proactive work ahead of it, because I know it took a lot, so thank you. To the
Thanks for the kind words. It was a group effort,
I
me
agree.
and all my colleagues.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate it.
Mary Sue.
Chair Morrissey, we have 3 speakers signed up, so we'll start with those. And once we're finished with the pre-signed up, we'll open the floor if there's any others that would like to speak. Would you like me to proceed?
Thank you.
Okay.
Call your attention to written comments that we,
Could you speak inside the
they were
microphone?
also submitted previously, but I want to make sure that you can find them in that thick packet of stuff that you got. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Diane Nygaard, representing Preserve Talavera. This SB 79 plan feels rushed because it is. And we greatly appreciate the massive effort our city staff have undertaken to get this package before you tonight so they can be ready by July 1st. The initial worst-case assessment for Oceanside, this could require up to 10,000 more residential units at all 7 Sprinter stations, 70,000 more citywide. Can you imagine that? But we believe our staff have come up with a plan that complies with the law, but also tries to take advantage of all of the exemptions that are allowed. We don't know how much growth that is going to force on our city, but it's going to be a whole lot less than what the worst-case scenario. So we urge you to adopt the staff recommendations, but to also provide direction to the City Council to address a few major issues. This proposes to exempt all hard-line preserved lands, but in the course of preparing the general plan update, staff have determined our current baseline maps of preserved lands are not accurate, and they're in the process of issuing an RFP for a consultant study to verify those lands. So our concern is how will this new, more accurate information and definition of hardline preserves get reflected so that all of those projects that are eligible do get exempted. And we're going to need a massive investment in infrastructure to support this massive amount of growth. So please look at the first 4 points in our written comments on that. We need to commit to update our climate action plan to incorporate this growth and address the fatal flaws of the new cap. It fails to meet the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction target. The more growth we have, the greater the emissions, and we'll be even further behind in addressing climate change. We need to update our transportation impact fees to cover the cost of improving all modes of transportation, prioritizing work in this Oceanside Boulevard. That means pedestrian access and safety, bicycle routes, and of course, public transit. We need to update the methodology we use for our local transportation studies and to provide adequate funding for this infrastructure. So we urge you to ask the City Council to address all of these issues. We can't just build more housing and not provide the transportation system, the parks, and the public spaces that will make our city livable for all those new residents and for all of us who already live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, Honorable Commission. My name is Mike Bullock. I live at 1800 Bayberry Drive. And, you know, SB 79, it is kind of scary, and I'm going to be kind of a contrarian here because I think we need to let things unfold and go ahead and let SB 79 take effect and see what the developers really want to do. Developers have to make return on their investment. And how many jobs are here? Let's think of it a little bit about the 85% of people which are not affordable. That's market-based. Those are really, really high rents. And the people that want those units and they go into those units want them because that's the best they can find, and they're really happy to go in there. And they have succeeded in life. You know, they are making really solid contributions in the country in whatever profession they're in. And those are the kind of people we welcome to Oceanside. Now let's talk about the 15%. We need affordable housing. You know, we're all doing pretty well. If we're at this meeting, we're doing okay. If you're on this commission, city council, and so on and so forth, but people are really suffering. They look at the rents and they look at the availability. They can't find a place to live. And that's why we have this, you know, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need to be pushed by the state government, but we do, because we need housing, and we also have a climate crisis. So there's two things pushing this thing. And so I would like to see it not deferred at all. And I would like to see the Sprinter, you know, it has to be electrified, it has to be double tracked, it has to run 24/7, and it has to run very short intervals. But that is a different world from what we're in now. And all of this development, it's not going to happen overnight. People have to get financing. They have to have a business plan. They have to believe they can get that 85%. That makes the whole thing work. If they don't think they can get the 85% market-based tenants, they're not going to go forward. So, you know, the last speaker just talked about the huge numbers of what it represents. Well, that's absolutely true. She's telling you the truth. But that doesn't happen overnight. That is a very, very long process, and there's things that we have to do. The other thing is people are afraid of traffic, but we can do things to limit vehicle miles traveled, per capita vehicle miles traveled, and we need to do those things anyway. I mentioned the climate crisis, and it really is a crisis. I hope everybody on Earth Day went to hear somebody explain why it's a climate crisis, what we have to do about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair, Commissioners, Jimmy Knott III, La Salina Mobile Village. and I appreciate staff and their preparation of this. And with apologies to my dear brother Mike, I have to say he is wrong. Because part of this plan protects communities like mine, where we have people who are in the class of extremely low income, earning less than $34,000 a year. We are existing, a lot of people in the mobile home parks, on rent control. And that's one of the areas that will be exempt from this. You know, this plan that the state wants to rob. We are already under threats from our park owners. And at any moment, they can start trying to rob the land that we sit on and take and do horrible things. As from the homes we own, and we would be out in the streets. We would be homeless. And where would we end up? We would be at your benefit, or someone's benefit, or dead, or something. This is where I appreciate the rent control exemption within this plan. We need it. We need it. I wish it was stronger that we could protect all those people who are extremely low income, not just within the mobile home community, but within all those areas. But I know we are limited by law, and staff has diligently studied those areas and made sure to include us and to give us some limited protections. And we would appreciate your help in preserving our rights and our homes, as small and limited as they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
That concludes our pre-registered speakers. If there's anyone else in the gallery that would like to come forward, please state your name clearly for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I don't see anybody coming forward. Chair?
Okay, that will end our public discussion. Commissioner Gonzalez? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone on the dais that has any questions? If that's the case, can I get a motion?
Make a motion to adopt the Planning Commission Resolution 2026 P08, recommending that the City Council approve the phase ordinance as authorized under SB 79.
Thank you, Commissioner Anthony. Is there a second?
I second.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Ogden. Please vote.
Let the record show the motion passes 7-0.
Okay, item 5 is the consideration of the general plan amendment involving Phase 2 of a comprehensive general plan update, smart and sustainable corridors specific plan, and climate action plan update, and associated final environmental impact report and overriding considerations. If we could have disclosures. Commissioner Ogden, we start on your end, please.
No disclosure.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Staff briefing, the staff report, conversations with the community.
Commissioner.
Staff briefing and staff report.
Staff briefing and report is me also.
Staff
Commissioner Reddick.
briefing and report.
Staff briefing and report.
Staff briefing and staff report.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioner. Good evening, Chair Morrissey, fellow commissioners. My name is Oscar Romero. For tonight's item, I'd like to clarify two things. We received notification of 2 emails that were included as part of our public review period for the EIR, which were not included as part of the response to comments, which were posted on May 8th. I'd like to add that to the record for today. Also, there was an update to attachment 2 for the resolution of the general plan, specific plan, to include findings for the specific plan as part of it. You should have received both an email from Mary Sue and a hard copy in front of you.
I got that. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Again, my name is Oscar Romero, City Planner for the City of Oceanside, and the item before you tonight is the General Plan Update, the Smart and Sustainable Corridor Specific Plan, and the Climate Action Plan, also known as Onward Oceanside Phase 2. Staff recommends City Council certification of the final EIR for the Onward Oceanside project, Phase 2 of the Comprehensive General Plan Update, Smart and Sustainable Corridor Specific Plan, Climate Action Plan Update, and the adaptation and the adoption of the Findings of Fact, Statement of Overriding Considerations, and Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program for CEQA Guidelines 15093 by adoption of Planning Commission Resolution Number 2026-P06. Staff recommends City Council adoption of a general plan amendment for the Onward Oceanside project for Government Code Section 65300 by adoption of Planning Commission Resolution Number 2026-P004. Staff further recommends City Council adoption of the Smart and Sustainable Corridor Specific Plan for the Onward Oceanside project for Government Code Section 65450 by adoption of Planning Commission Resolution Number 2026-P04. Okay. State law mandates each city to adopt a comprehensive long-term general plan in an effort to forecast growth management. How much will the city grow and where can we accommodate for this increase? Areas of focus are housing, public services, environmental protection, and economic resilience. What has the City of Oceanside done for its general plan and its updates? Environmental resources were prepared in 1970 along with safety and noise. So it's been over 50 years where we haven't updated these elements. Military preservation element was included in 1981. Our land use element was adopted in 1986, about 40 years ago. And what have we done recently? Our circulation element in 2012 was updated, economic development and climate action plan in 2019, and our housing element was certified in 2023. So the GPU Phase 1 project was initiated in 2019 and included the adoption of the economic development element, energy and climate action element, and our first climate action. The item before you today is Phase 2, which started in 2020. The scope of work included the entire city's sphere of influence, the spheres which are outside the city boundary but potential to annex into the city. The scope of work included elements of the general plan, a proposed specific plan to accommodate growth and housing development, as well as an update to the CAP, which is updated every 5 years, and a CEQA analysis. Phase 2 will consist of land use changes, which will require Coastal Commission certification. The following City Council adoption of the GPU have these deliverables: a Trails Master Plan, Active Transportation Plan, and the South Morrow Hills Community. Required elements in the general plan are land use, circulation, housing, conservation, open space, noise, safety, environmental justice, and air quality. These have been revised to the following elements, which are remarkable community element, efficient and compatible land use element, integrated mobility element, vital and sustainable resources, safe and resilient environment, healthy and livable community element. One of the elements not included as part of the general plan update is the housing element, which was approved and certified by council and the Housing Community Development in 2023. This element is subject to the state housing cycle, which requires an update every 10 years. Per this element, the city's regional housing needs assessment, RHNA numbers, were included as part of the city's requirement to provide suitable sites for the development of 5,443 units. Per this requirement, Program 9 in the housing element includes the deliverable to develop a specific plan to channel growth, housing and development within 3 corridors: Vista Way, Oceanside Boulevard, and Mission Avenue, which I will address later in this presentation. Public outreach for this effort took place from 2020 to 2024. At this time, COVID affected the massive shutdown across the nation and required staff to be a bit more creative. In doing so, staff and the consultant created the onwardoceanside.com webpage to provide updates to the community regarding meetings, documents, and any other information. Staff created bilingual forums, focus groups, email lists to serve roughly 2,400 members. There were online surveys, stakeholder interviews, and neighborhood planning area office hours. The city went above and beyond for public outreach. The general plan has a growth management projection to the year 2050. Density is expected, on average, to roughly be around 32 dwelling units per acre along transit-served corridors, with up to 16,875 new units and 28,500 new jobs. The population is expected to reach 222,000, an increase of roughly 45,000. This increase will require a greater number of multifamily residential units and less new single-family dwelling units. The increased population and housing units have been captured as part of the infill development along the corridors specifically. The first element that we'll start with is a remarkable community element. This includes character-defining assets, neighborhood identity and character, such as South Memorial Hills as an agricultural district and the East Side as a cultural hub. This element will create consistent urban design, maintain scenic views, increase tribal resource efforts, and continue to preserve historic resources. Part of the remarkable community element was the council-adopted Sustainable Tourism Master Plan, a 10-year plan to outline the overall vision and strategy to develop Oceanside's visitor economy while providing strategies for stewarding tourism towards a sustainable future. The next element is the efficient and compatible land use element, which focuses on the tangible. Where in the city will we designate areas for housing, employment, at what scale, meaning at what density? This element prioritized infill development within the city's major commercial corridors in the specific plan to support a mix of complementary uses. The integrated mobility element focuses on roadway classifications, whether the city will need 2 or 4-lane road systems, apply complete streets concepts such as microtransit, active transportation facilities, and evacuation. Here we see an example of a complete street, expanded sidewalks, protected bike lanes, and designated transit lanes with medians. Our vital and sustainable resources element focuses on the conservation of natural resources, preservation of sensitive habitat, farmland, water resources, community facilities, and climate action. The VSR, also known, includes policies from the draft sub-area plan intended to conserve natural resources. The draft sub-area plan is a specific document guiding the protection of focus planning areas, hardline and softline preserve areas, and the wildlife corridor. The draft sub-area plan was prepared in 2005 and revised in 2010 and 2016. In 2022, City Council decided not to pursue the effort to adopt the plan due to its financial obligations. Instead, staff was directed to include the sub-area plan policies into the VSR to capture a framework for future action. Codifying the sub-area plan policies in the general plan provides action items requiring the implementation of a biological protection ordinance, which would allow the city to streamline CEQA review for projects with the use of existing mitigation ratio, 100-foot buffers required as drafted in the sub-area plan. By pursuing this, the city will not have the ability to provide incidental take permits for federally endangered species, but only one other agency may do so at this time. The safe and resilient environment element focuses on prevention and planning for natural hazards, human-induced hazards, climate adaptation, terrorism, and cyber threats, as well as subthreat. The healthy and livable community element includes topics of community health, noise, civic engagement, recreational opportunities, community facilities, and services and utilities and infrastructure. This section also incorporates environmental justice and social equity, which are underlying themes that have been missing. For example, park space is more abundant throughout newer developments, whereas urban communities are constrained by lack of space and resources. The public review period for the EIR took place as of June 4th, 2024, when the documents were made available. On June 20th, 2024, the documents were extended for two-time public review, and the documents were found to have enough information to require recirculation of the EIR as of December 2025 of this year up until February 2026, December 2025 of last year to February 2026 of this year. The general plan was reviewed under CEQA and developed as a programmatic EIR with overriding consideration. A programmatic EIR is not parcel specific. The intent is to set thresholds to allow for private developments to be streamlined under CEQA by providing regulatory policy direction. The final EIR consists of a statement of overriding considerations, significant and unavoidable impacts, which are air quality, GHG, noise, and public services and or utility services. However, by approving the EIR, the city will plan for housing needs, increase in employment, improve mobility, expand city parkland, draft a biological resource protection ordinance, and approval of the overriding consideration allows the implementation of the CAP. For these reasons, staff recommends approval of the EIR and overriding considerations. Next is our smart and sustainable corridor specific. What is the specific plan? This is a regulatory document implementing the policies within the general plan to guide future development. As noted, the general plan designated corridors as the areas available for infill housing development within close proximity to employers. The specific plan will also include public realm improvements and complete street roadway improvements. The planning area identified for the specific plan consists of the city's three main corridors: Vista Way, Oceanside Boulevard, and Mission Avenue. Why these three? Mission Avenue, due to its high-frequency bus service and mixed-use opportunities. Oceanside Boulevard, because of the Sprinter Rail Station and smart growth opportunity areas. And Vista Way for its close proximity to the 78. Land use designations within the corridors will increase with residential densities of 30 dwelling units for medium and 40 dwelling units per acre for high density. Mixed-use corridors will have a density of 40 dwelling units per acre, and centers mixed use will be 55 dwelling units per acre. Other districts within this document will be commercial, industrial, open space, and public. The urban design will consist of a complete street approach, maintaining landscape parkways, street furnishings such as benches, pedestrian lighting, and shade trees. Parks and public spaces will be shifted from traditional practices and will be incorporated into new development as pocket parks, plazas, and paseos. As the corridors increase density, available land will also be limited, and these practices will ensure public amenities. Site design will include pedestrian-friendly environments and attractive and accessible urban design. There will also be a wayfinding and public art component, which will facilitate navigational access and contribute to each corridor's unique identity. Here's an example of a complete street network: expanded walkways for pedestrians, protected bike lanes, designated bus lanes with medians to provide for a safe and comfortable network. How will the implementation of the specific plan be implemented and what financing mechanisms are there? Development reviews will be streamlined for those projects meeting the development standards within the specific plan. Any deviation from the code will require discretionary review. Capital improvements and funding will be subject to the investment in infrastructure and amenities required. Potential funding sources are special assessment districts, development impact fees, and potential external grants and loans. This concludes my portion of the presentation. I will now pass this along to Justin Gamble, Sustainability Administrator.
Good evening, Chair Morrissey and fellow commissioners. My name is Justin Gamble. I'm the Sustainability Program Administrator with the Development Services Department, and I'll be providing a summary of the Climate Action Plan update, which is a component of the Onward Oceanside project. I'll also be providing information on the purpose of the Climate Action Plan, or we call it the CAP for short, and its integration with the Phase 2 General Plan update. I'll also provide an overview of the plan's structure, which includes an accounting of the city's greenhouse gas emissions, goal setting based on state legislative targets, an overview of the emission reduction measures in the CAP, and the proposed progress monitoring and reporting schedule. I'll also give a brief summary of prior public comment and changes made to the final. So the purpose of the CAP is to complement the sustainable growth themes of the general plan update by serving as an actionable roadmap to efficient movement, energy use, and public infrastructure while promoting clean, healthy communities. The Climate Action Plan is a living document meant to be updated regularly with a focus on reducing citywide greenhouse gas emissions, we call them GHGs for short, from various sectors of the economy. The CAP aligns the city's actions with statewide climate goals while proposing local measures that supplement the general plan's policies to build local resilience, complement economic growth, and streamline future development. Having an adopted CAP serves an important role in assuring regulatory compliance under the California Environmental Quality Act for development review. It builds community resiliency to climate change, and it qualifies the city for future grant funding opportunities. The first Climate Action Plan was adopted by City Council in 2019 through Phase 1 of the General Plan update as a component of the energy and climate action element. This update is required now to align our goals with new statewide legislation and incorporate new actions that complement the General Plan update's focus on infill development and efficient land use. The CAP update is corresponding with Phase 2 of the General Plan update as the technical foundation for greenhouse gas emissions analysis in the project's final environmental impact report. CEQA requires the city to analyze the cumulative emissions from growth projected in the General Plan update. The goals and measures proposed in the CAP update address future emissions resulting from the city's growth, guided under policies presented in the General Plan elements. The CAP's goals are closely aligned with state climate goals set forth in Senate Bill 32 and Assembly Bill 1279, which call for substantial reductions in statewide emissions by 2030 and 2045, respectively. On a practical level, the CAP update incorporates specific General Plan policies to achieve greenhouse gas reductions. This is the case such as incentivizing infill and transit-focused redevelopment within the corridor's specific plan, improving active transportation and public transit access in the integrated mobility element, and planning for a resilient climate-focused future in the safe and resilient environment element. The starting point for the CAP update was building a baseline greenhouse gas emissions inventory. This exercise establishes baseline conditions from which the city can forecast future emissions and set reduction goals to develop actions to achieve the statewide targets. The inventory is based primarily on 2018 transportation data from SANDAG that was calibrated with energy use, transportation, and land use data specific to Oceanside. When the CAP update began in 2022, reliable transportation data after 2018 were not available due to the skewed transportation trends that arose from the COVID-19 lockdowns. Emissions are measured in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per year, which is a standardized unit for budgeting GHG emissions and reductions. The citywide greenhouse gas emissions fall into 6 primary sectors of our economy. As shown in the chart here, on-road transportation and building energy use make up the majority of the city's baseline emissions. Additional emissions are attributed to solid waste management, energy use from water and wastewater treatment, and off-road equipment use. The next step was forecasting how greenhouse gas emissions will change over time to account for population growth and trends in energy use and transportation that were used in the general plan update. Our future emissions reductions are generally assumed to scale with those statewide due to legislative drivers in the areas of transportation and energy. This is termed the adjusted business as usual scenario in the CAP. This figure illustrates the city's projected GHG reductions by emissions sector as noted by the different colors. The black dashed line indicates the aggressive GHG reductions that the city must achieve for each of the key milestone targets set by the state and used in the CAP update. These targets include a 27% reduction from baseline by 2030, which aligns with Senate Bill 32, a 90% reduction from baseline by 2045 to align with Assembly Bill 1279, and maintaining a 90% reduction from baseline through 2050, which is the planning horizon of the general plan update. To support the state's GHG reduction goals and implement sustainability policies in the general plan update, the CAP update identifies 17 greenhouse gas reduction measures that fall into 6 focus sectors. Each measure is supported by 1 or more implementing actions with a corresponding emission reduction value that is assigned to it. These measures take credit for existing programs, but also new policies that are to be developed and funded in the coming years. Based on the baseline conditions, the energy and transportation sectors will require the most level of effort to achieve our goals as they account for the vast majority of our annual GHG emissions. Examples of proposed measures in the energy sector include future building code amendments that would require certain electrification upgrades to the city's existing building stock, policies to incentivize additional solar on existing buildings, and encouraging energy customers to choose 100% renewable energy through our community choice aggregator, Clean Energy Alliance. Proposed measures in the transportation sector include encouragement of growth along transit corridors and a complete streets policies with dedicated bikeways that are consistent with policies in the smart and sustainable corridor specific. Also, expansion of electric vehicle charging infrastructure for both private development projects and at city facilities, and the expansion of microtransit opportunities such as the Go Side shuttle and enhanced bike lane and pedestrian infrastructure. Examples of measures in the solid waste sector are aimed at reducing emissions from waste collection, waste processing, and landfills. These include continuing to implement the state requirements for mandatory organics recycling under SB 1383, increasing local landfill diversion rates beyond state goals. Proposed measures in the water sector are aimed at reducing energy associated with importing and treating water and wastewater with a focus on water use efficiency. This includes continuing to reduce per water capita consumption, increasing local water supply through projects like Pure Water Oceanside, and expanding water efficient retrofit requirements for new development. The carbon sequestration sector includes measures that incorporate natural processes into the built environment to capture and store carbon from emissions. These include the expansion of the urban tree canopy on both private and public land, conserving open space in working lands with a focus on regenerative farming practices, and promoting green street policies and design standards to increase urban shade and stormwater capture and infrastructure. While not a source of emissions, the local green economy sector includes actions that increase awareness of sustainability practices to promote high-quality job growth in Oceanside in the energy sector. Example measures include encouraging workforce development in sustainable energy and materials industries and recognizing sustainable businesses and tourism practices through recognition. I know there's a lot of data on this slide, so just try to focus on the lower 4 rows. In analyzing how each of the proposed measures in the CAP update would contribute to achieving the 3 milestone targets, the emissions reductions were modeled for each sector and they were compared to the state's emission forecasts and the growth that was predicted in the general plan update. While the total estimated greenhouse gas reductions would be sufficient to achieve the goal for 2030, which is consistent with the state's targets, the quantified measures alone would not be sufficient to achieve the 2045 and 2050 emissions targets. This is illustrated by the data here in this table that shows the total reductions needed, the reductions provided by the measures, and the remaining emissions gap. CAP update included all feasible measures through careful consideration of feasibility, costs to the city and community, existing regulations, and the current availability of city resources, while setting us on a pathway to alignment with the state's ambitious reduction goals. The CAP update includes implementation timelines and a framework for documenting progress towards the GHG emissions reduction. As I mentioned, the CAP is expected to be a living document to be updated at least every 5 years. Success will require a coordinated effort between departments, with measures to be considered during the routine city budget development process. Following adoption, the CAP calls for routine progress reporting and assessments of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. These commitments include biennial updates to the emissions inventory, annual progress reporting to the City Council and relevant commissions such as this body, with a goal on public engagement and transparency, and using key performance indicators as a measuring tool to adapt the emission reduction measures as necessary. While the city currently does have a dedicated CAP implementation budget this fiscal year and is planning for an expansion of that budget next fiscal year, a forthcoming implementation cost analysis will help to inform that budgeting process. This is expected to be completed by mid to late 2026. Since the CAP update was analyzed under the programmatic EIR for the general plan update, it is considered a CEQA-qualified plan for the reduction of GHGs. Under CEQA, discretionary development projects must analyze the impact of their expected emissions. They may tier this analysis from that was performed in the CAP update by showing consistency with CAP measures in the areas of transportation, energy efficiency, waste reduction, and infill development. Under CEQA, project reviews may be streamlined by including features required by the CAP to avoid intensive and time-consuming project-level greenhouse gas analysis. The streamlined review pathway is dependent on the project's consistency with existing land use and zoning and is subject to alternative thresholds if it cannot incorporate project features required by the Climate Action Plan. It should be noted that this checklist, the tool that is to be used to screen projects, may only be used for those that are expected to be operational prior to 2031, as measures in the CAP update were not sufficient to achieve the greenhouse gas reduction targets beyond 2030. Discretionary projects can comply with the checklist, are determined to not have cumulatively significant emissions impacts under CEQA. This will be supported by new guidelines for determining that significance, which is actually item 6 in tonight's agenda. And the checklist will ensure that the emissions from new development projects are accounted for in the Climate Action Plan's updates growth projections, and that the emission control measures are incorporated where they are not otherwise legally required. The consistency checklist is tailored both to private development and city-initiated capital improvement projects, and applicable features are to be codified in each project's conditions of approval. The checklist is itemized by emissions sectors similar to the CAP update and how it's structured. It includes actions and operational features that are based on the project's land use and operational type. Examples may include phased-in requirements for advancing building energy use efficiency, requiring advanced electric vehicle charging installation, and reducing vehicle miles traveled for projects through transportation demand management plans, and also compliance with the corridor-specific plan. Through the draft general plan elements and draft EIR circulation, the city received written public comments on a range of issues and actions presented in the CAP update. While the comments were often highly specific to both existing climate policies and proposed actions in the CAP, some comments did fall into general categories that are highlighted here. It included a need for a comprehensive cost analysis to understand the budget and resources required to administer the Climate Action Plan. And as I mentioned previously, an implementation cost study is currently underway. There were concerns with funding mechanisms required to launch and administer the most ambitious GHG measures, such as building energy retrofits. Comments on the need to update the consistency checklist, which I just covered. This has been addressed at the time of this hearing with a draft CAP consistency checklist and proposed guidelines for significance determination. and concerns with the city's control over the rate and scope of building electrification in the private sector. That concludes my portion of the presentation. And so again, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council that they certify the final EIR for the Onward Oceanside project, which is Phase 2 of the Comprehensive General Plan Update, Smart and Sustainable Corridors Specific Plan and Climate Action Plan Update, adopt the findings of fact, statement of overriding considerations, and mitigation monitoring and reporting program per CEQA guidelines by adoption of Planning Commission Resolution number 2026-P06. And furthermore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council adoption of General Plan Amendment for the Onward Oceanside project per Government Code Section 65300 by adoption of Planning Commission Resolution 2026-P04, and further recommends that City Council adopt the Smart and Sustainable Corridor Specific Plan for the Onward Oceanside project by adoption of Planning Commission Resolution 2026-P04. Staff are available for questions.
Well, thank you, Justin. Do we have any questions? Do we have, how are we doing on public interviews or?
Chair Morrissey, we have 12 signed up
Okay.
to speak. Would you like to proceed with 3 minutes each?
Okay.
Okay, let's,
Actually, before we start that, I did have a question on the, from Commissioner Dodds.
I wanted to first thank you for the report. I know that was a lot of work, but I do have a question. One of the slides, it said that that it looks like we're not going to meet the projected GHG reductions. Is that correct? Is there anything that we can do to improve that?
Yes, Commissioner Dodds, that is correct. So we do achieve the 2030 state targets for greenhouse gas reductions, but given the degree to which the city is beholden to the severe reductions, well, I should say severe, but the scale of reductions that the state is requiring, the measures that we quantified in the Climate Action Plan, while it puts us on the right track, additional measures would be required or modified in future cap updates to achieve those reductions. So yes, that is correct. There's an emissions gap at 2045 and 2050.
Is this going to be based, is it financial that's going to keep us from reaching these goals?
Not necessarily financial, but technologically, legally, what's within the scope of the city's control. Because such a large portion of the city's emissions fall in the transportation sector, namely like on-road vehicle use, the scope of the city's control over, private vehicle use, especially like even on highways and large roads, we don't have that much control over it, say, compared to what the state does. So we have to find other ways to kind of plug the holes, right? And the most obvious one is building energy use. I think that's like the last frontier for us to address and really reduce GHGs through energy use.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. This is about the general plan update. I don't see specifics in section 1.7, general plan administration, as to how the plan is monitored. Where and how does the ongoing monitoring and progress towards the goals happen?
Can you repeat that one more time, Commissioner Gonzalez? 1.7 of?
The general plan, it's section 1.7, general plan administration. I know there's been extensive community participation and outreach, and I don't see where that continues if this is a living document. So I'm curious about the monitoring and progress reports.
Well, I think all of the public outreach that was done was part of developing the general plan itself. All the implementation mechanisms and tools like the biological resource ordinance and all of that will follow suit, and that effort will continue once those get initiated.
Sorry, so the progress towards the goals and that sort of thing, like how, is there a dashboard or what are you all working from to keep track?
help me understand the question. Are you asking in regard to Onward Oceanside or our email listserv?
No, the plan itself, right? It articulates goals and actions within every section. But then in the plan administration, it's really lean as to where the monitoring happens, where the, how the public is going to understand how we're doing after they participated, in all of this development. I'm curious about how do we close that communication loop and keep that feedback cycle happening?
I don't think that we've crafted what that next step is, but we are open to, any ideas you may have.
Commissioner Ogden?
Question for Justin. Justin.
Could you pull the microphone down to your, yeah.
Question for Justin. Justin, how much the CAP consistency checklist update, has that been done? I mean, how much work needs to be done on that?
There was a draft included in tonight's packet.
But I don't know what the old one looked like. How much work is that? Is it significant or is it?
For an applicant, it depends on the project type. For say a multifamily, residential project, more often than not, applicants are going to have an environmental consultant on task to help them through the CEQA process.
Right.
So this is not a unique type of planning tool. It's used by other cities.
Gotcha. Okay, and how the public comment received, how much was received? How did the public react to the seminars or whatever were put on through that process?
Are you talking about the CAP in its entirety?
The entire thing, the entire process.
So we released the CAP alongside the rest of the deliverables in June of 2024 as part of the original circulation.
Right.
I believe we received at least 50 pages of comments just on the CAP alone.
Okay.
We also had a community forum in June of 2024. Again, this was from previous staff that worked on the project where we solicited input. And I believe there's also an online survey that was pushed out to over 400 people to get feedback on climate policies and what they felt was important to go into the plan.
But there was a lot of feedback that you received, or a fair amount?
I would have to look into the record to see the responses on the survey, but again, we did receive quite a number of pages and comment letters on the climate action plan itself.
I just want to see the reaction that the public will have based upon what's being presented. If they've seen that before, I assume.
Yes.
I mean, we're going to fast track this process. I just want to make sure that it has been out there. People had a chance to comment on that. I just want to make sure that's been taken care of.
Correct. And furthermore, we did a comprehensive general plan update workshop to the City Council on March 19th of last year, where we did allow it's public forum, so we solicited public comment and feedback there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. I have a question about the environmental justice and social equity issues that are addressed. I think you said they were addressed in the healthy and livable community element. I'm curious about the details of how those issues are addressed and if any SB 1000 best practices are reflected in the plan.
And Chair Morrissey and Commissioner Gonzalez and the rest of the commission, I'm going to address that one because I did some additional research on this as well. And just for purposes of introductions, you're not probably, you don't see the city manager at a planning commission meeting very often. Just for context, for those of you who don't know, when I was hired by the city in 2017, I was hired as the Development Services Director. And so I was actually involved in the initiation of this phase of the general plan program and have been involved generally in the background because of my position now since its inception. So I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the process. Well, actually, I'm familiar with the complete process that we followed since 2017 anyway. But to answer your question, Commissioner Gonzalez, and it is something that I do recall having quite a bit of conversation on early on in the process. So SB 1000 is a piece of legislation that requires general plans from that point moving forward, once the legislation was approved, to include social equity components and languages and policies. And that was a statewide piece of legislation. One thing to keep in mind is technically SB 1000 doesn't apply to Oceanside because we don't have any state designated disadvantaged communities. Although we do certainly have areas of the city that have challenges, and we all know that. But I do recall the previous project manager of the general plan update wanted to ensure that we were as compliant as we could be with SB 1000. So there are a number of policies that are sprinkled throughout the general plan, generally in the element that you just mentioned. But some of the policies that are in the general plan that speak specifically to social equity are policies related to access to healthy foods, access to healthcare, supporting urban agriculture as a means to ensure fresh groceries to all communities, addressing homelessness, also encouraging community engagement, especially in some of our historically disadvantaged communities. And some of those examples include, as you may or may not know, we have leadership academies that we often, actually we have one just kicking off now in the Libby Lake area to get communities who historically haven't been engaged in city governance to kind of give them the tools to become more engaged. One of the policies, coincidentally, is actually the creation of a community relations commission, which, because the general plan process dragged out a little bit long, we've actually created the CRC, or the city council did anyway. There are a lot of policies as well, or policy language that speaks to the equitable distribution of public services and facilities. As an example, I was noticing there's language in there that supports mobile libraries to ensure that our library system is able to get out and do the good work that they do in all the city's neighborhoods. In addition to that, there's also policies that support wide broadband access so that all folks have access to the digital toolkit that they need to be able to engage in the digital world that we now live in. So those are some examples. I think we really did try to do our best to meet the goals of SB 1000, even though we weren't technically required to. One other thing that I wanted to mention as well, and it's really kind of a shout out to the former project manager, Russ Cunningham, who many of you know, who he's probably listening in tonight. This was his baby for several years, but I know that he did an extraordinary amount of effort to do public outreach in engaged neighborhoods that are typically hard to get public participation in, leveraging some of our connections that we have in our neighborhood resource centers, walking door to door in some of our neighborhoods that are oftentimes difficult to reach to get the folks engaged in outreach and this sort of government work that we do. We did an extraordinary amount of efforts. Many of our workshops were bilingual. So I think Russ really did an excellent job of trying to get the word out and trying to get the community engaged. And I think it speaks to the number of participants that we actually had, over 2,000 participants in much of our public outreach efforts as well. So I just kind of wanted to mention that as well. So thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Mary Sue, comments from the public?
Yes, we have 12 speakers signed up, so if you would please come forward in the order your name appears on the screen. State your name clearly for the gallery. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and also note we have 2 lecterns, so please feel free to pre-stage when you see your name is next. First up, we'll have Doreen Stradlander. You have 3 minutes.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Good evening. My name is Doreen Statlander. I'm a resident of Oceanside. I'm also a retired wildlife biologist with over 25 years in habitat conservation planning. The EIR for the general plan update concludes that impacts to wildlife movement would be less than significant based on implementing the strategies within the vital and sustainable resources element. However, the VCR is incomplete and outdated because it relies on the city's draft sub-area plan, which has not been updated in over a decade. And while the VSR indicates a commitment to update vegetation and wildlife corridor mapping, including commissioning wildlife movement studies, the VSR omits the information that we currently know. First off, we know that the Multiple Habitat Conservation Program plan, which the sub-area plan and the VSR tiers off of, identified the area currently known as the Jeffries Ranch Preserve, along with Guajome Regional Park, as core biological areas. We know that subsequent to the sub-area plan, the Jeffries Ranch Preserve, which had a hardline development agreement on it, was preserved in its entirety. We know that the wildlife corridor studies can be valuable, but they are costly and time-intensive. We also know that wildlife movement studies were not conducted to identify the wildlife corridor planning zone that appears in the VSR. We know from the tenets of conservation biology that biological core areas need to be connected to other biological core areas, and that the connecting corridors should be of the shortest distance possible with buffers. We know that open space has already been designated along the Jeffries Ranch Preserve Guajome Regional Park corridor. We also know that in order to assemble the remainder of the corridor, future land contributions are needed. With the proposed GP update and VSR, the Jeffries Ranch corridor would not be formally recognized for protection. Earlier this year, the Oceanside City Council unanimously voted to deny certification of the Guajome Lakes final EIR, based in part on the failure to address impacts to wildlife connectivity. The city's EIR and VSR also fails to adequately address this issue. Therefore, the city's EIR findings of less than significant impacts to wildlife movement is currently not defensible. To rectify this, the VSR needs to revise the wildlife corridor planning zone to include the Jeffries Ranch Preserve Guajome Regional Park corridor. These changes need to be incorporated prior to certifying the EIR. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis Martinick, 46-year resident of South Morro Hills, the city's agricultural area. The Climate Action Plan has an objective of preserving agricultural lands. The city residents have expressed their willingness and their desire to do exactly that. It's a good way of accomplishing climate action goals. It's compatible with your Sustainable Corridors program, and which is really worthwhile. Smart growth, put the growth where you have the infrastructure. It's also good from the point of having a place to grow local produce, and also to reduce the amount of development and sprawl development. One particular program that's not in the proposed update is the SALT program, Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program. It should be. It's a way for farmers or for landowners of agricultural land to be compensated for putting deed restrictions on their land for agriculture. So it makes doing what they're doing, growing crops, more feasible from an economic or financial point of view. That's not in the present plan, and it should be. One of the reasons maybe it's not is because it hasn't been used since the 2019 version of the plan. And I believe the reason for that is some inconsistencies with the city as far as what the objectives for its agricultural lands are. One was the vote by the City Council for the North River Farms project, which took 176 acres of prime agricultural land from that area. It's a sprawl development, and it basically puts the idea in farmers or landowners' heads what is the city going to do? What is its objectives really for the land that's out there? It's inconsistent. Another was a proposal for doing clustered housing in the South Morrow Hills specific plan. You do clustered housing in an agricultural area, it's the definition of sprawl. It's poor development. It's long-term significant cost to the city. I strongly recommend that you put the SALT program back in and show some emphasis that the city is committed to preserving agricultural lands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Morrissey and Commissioners. My name is Barbara Collins, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Sierra Club to make comments on the CAP. We appreciate the city's efforts to update its climate strategy, and there are some significant improvements in the current draft. Yet it falls short of the robust and forcible action needed to address the climate crisis and protect our community. We urge the Commission to address the following critical deficiencies before recommending approval. The first one, the failure to meet the state GHG reduction goals. We're profoundly disappointed that the draft does not plan to meet the minimum GHG reduction goals established by the state. As a coastal city vulnerable to sea level rise and extreme weather, Oceanside must be a leader and not a laggard in this issue. We must align our local targets with the state mandates. Some of the things we know could be done are more robust transportation demand management and the building electrification program, which we think is a great concept, but we need to see a more fully defined program and implementation plan with its funding identified. The number two issue is accelerated schedule. We need an accelerated schedule for the CAP updates to account for the growth that we've heard is coming to Oceanside tonight. This was all drafted most of it was drafted prior to SB 79. And so we feel that the city should and must commit to an accelerated schedule to update the CAP as soon as we have more concrete information about what the growth numbers are going to be. We also agree with the previous speaker about the restoration of the South Morrow Hills Land Conservation Plan. In our existing CAP adopted in 2019, we had a measure that was designed to preserve local farming, protect natural carbon sinks, and curb urban sprawl. This vital action item was completely removed from the new draft CAP. We're asking for this omission to be corrected. The city doesn't need to fund this program, but it needs to provide the organizational structure so that those SALT grants can be applied for and used to protect our farmland and to adequately compensate the farmers for the land or using it as farmland going into the future. And finally, we need adequate and sustained funding. Without a clear path to funding staff and mitigation programs, the CAP is going to be a shelf document rather than an active blueprint for sustainability. So we urge you to take add those recommendations for this draft CAP. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and Commissioners. I'm Dr. Alfie Atabey. I live down the street on Canyon Drive. First of all, I'd like to thank the entire team behind Onward Oceanside. Undoubtedly, it's a very comprehensive and highly beneficial general plan update. Today, I'm here on behalf of all the property owners who did not receive a notification regarding the land use designation of their property. I submitted our case last week as a public comment to Mr. Romero's office, and I received a very kind response. Obviously, we respect the schedule and the program, so we don't want to delay the process. However, and this is our case is regarding 3142 Vista Way. It's a 5-acre property by El Camino Real. And actually, we've been working on a project for a mixed-use development. We found out very late in the process that the designation is commercial. We understand that it may be too late for the committee to consider a redesignation. And if that's the case, we respect the process, but we would definitely need some guidance as to how to file an amendment. Hopefully it's not too late. Maybe it's possible for the consideration of a redesignation, but I know that there may be a lot of property owners who may not be aware of the designation and they may be working on certain projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Diane Wolke, District 2, 23-year resident. In March of this year, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, stated, "Every climate indicator is flashing red. Humanity has just endured 11 of the hottest years of record. When history repeats itself 11 times, it's no longer a coincidence. It is a call to act. Climate change is not going to wait for Oceanside to catch up with the science, nor their much-delayed cap. Between 2000 and 2019, approximately 489,000 heat-related deaths have occurred annually. Heat-related deaths for people over 65 have increased by 85%, and every year in California between 2010 and 2020, more than 5,000 emergency room visits and 60 deaths per year occurred in California. Youth, the elderly, those living in EJ and SJ communities are the most at risk, as are those who are pregnant. Our overbuilt community, lack of true open space, the 600 quadrillion, that's 6 with 17 zeros, of microplastics that are released to the atmosphere from land-based plastics, and that's in addition to the 26 quadrillion microplastics released annually from the ocean, are currently impacting our health, public health, as well as aquatic organisms. It's the reason we're seeing more and more dead seabirds, more dead sea lions. It's impacting, the heating of the ocean is impacting their ability to reach their own food sources, and that's why we have these animals dying. Continuing to build in areas of sea level rise, choking soil needed for life on Earth, which is caused by overbuilding, failure to regulate plastics in our community, including in our agricultural land, are all major contributors to climate change. Urgent action is required now for current residents and coming generations whose very existence is based on current decisions. A new version of CEQA 2026 was recently released. They are now falling under the Governor's Office of Land Conservation and Climate Innovation. And the California Coastal Commission released a report in October of 2025 on plastics. It applies to both the CDP and the LCP zones. Please move these plans forward. Let's not keep kicking the can down the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wasn't paying attention here. I called your attention to our written handout as well from earlier tonight. Honorable Chair, Commissioners, Diane Nygaard representing Preserve Calavera. I can tell you the plans before you tonight are far superior to our existing ones. Our city is under a time crunch to get them adopted before SB 79 becomes effective on July 1st. Our major concern is that the cap fails to meet the state greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, making us one of only 2 cities in the San Diego region have failed to do their fair share to address climate change. You asked the question earlier, are there other feasible measures that could be done? 16 cities in San Diego found feasible things to meet the target. Only 2 of them, Oceanside, will be one of only 2 who has. Of course, there are numerous feasible actions that could be done. We ask you to make it clear to the City Council you want to see a new cap as soon as the growth from SB 79 can be determined and one that fully meets the state requirements. Look at our written comments for 4 specific actions we ask you to take tonight. These are very minor actions, but they're important. please restore action AF3. You've heard from that from a couple of speakers. We cannot say we want to protect our farmland and then delete the only action item in the cap that would actually do that. AF3 is in the existing cap. We ask you to just carry that language forward into the new cap to allow the conservation easement program structure to be put into place. We're not saying fund it, just put the structure in place and make a real commitment to do that. The only action in the plan to actually protect our farmland. Secondly, add the number of acres of coastal sage scrub to be restored to VSR policy 5-8. The staff report on page 12 repeats the commitment that this is supposed to restore 145 acres in the wildlife corridor planning zone. But the policy doesn't say 145 acres. It just said restore coastal sage scrub. That number is critical. Third, revise policy 530 to better address bird-friendly design. You'll hear more about that from Patty. That language is very vague. We have collisions with buildings are a primary cause of bird death. That language needs to be improved. And we need to modify the edge effect conditions in policy 5-34 to cover all the conditions from the regional conservation plan. A key one that was omitted is educating people about responsible pet ownership. Cats out at night that predate on birds, allowing pet food and water in your yards that attracts predators and rodents. Simple things. We need to include all of the edge effect conditions from the regional plan. And I have to support what Doreen said. She was absolutely right on that, the wildlife corridor in the Jeffries area that has not been properly integrated into the plan. Thank you. 4 quick changes.
Can you wrap? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jolene Smith, and I'm a member of the Sierra Club and CAP team, also a member of the Oceanside Green Spaces Coalition. And I just want to emphasize what previous speakers have said about preserving our farmland. It's very important that we have the farmland in Oceanside to mitigate the climate crisis. We can't always be relying on our food coming from far away, hundreds of miles away. We need to have farmland, community gardens, urban farms right here in Oceanside. And so I would like to emphasize also to keep that provision that was in the previous cap for the SALT grants and the program to so that farmers can keep their land. Thank you.
Thank you.
Esteemed Planning Commission members, my name is Chiwa Slater. I am an Oceanside resident and a volunteer with the Oceanside chapter of Sierra Club CAP team. I don't be very brief. I just want to reiterate what my colleagues have already said. One thing that is a major concern to me, of course, the farmland, preservation of farmland, as was just said previously, is super important. We have no idea what's going to be happening with our food supply and in the years to come. And we need that land available. So all that I have to say really boils down to there are organizations that are willing to apply for the SALT grants and other funds that are needed to implement the various elements of the CAP plan and protect our farmland. What is lacking in the updated plan is a specified structure in which that can happen. Again, just as my colleagues asked, I have to say, what happened to AF3, that action item that provided for this that was in the 2019 CAP? Where is it? It doesn't seem to be in this version, and I request that that action be restored to the updated CAP. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Alison St. John, a longtime Oceanside resident. I'm also with the Sierra Club, and I'm going to be addressing the CAP update. Oceanside has come such a long way in the 20-plus years that I've lived here. It used to be the city that was furthest away from San Diego's downtown and closest to the Marine base. Now it's one of the top-rated, up-and-coming Southern California beach communities. But to learn that we are one of only 2 cities in the region whose climate action plan does not aim to meet the minimum greenhouse gas reduction goals after 2030, the goals established by the state, is disappointing. As a city that is set to grow fast in the near future, especially with the passage of SB 79, we should be stepping up and showing real initiative in the climate challenges and indeed crisis that face us all. One of the biggest sources of carbon emissions that we are not addressing aggressively is the use of natural gas, as we saw in one of Justin's slides. The city may be setting a good example by upgrading city facilities to use more sustainable energy, but I don't see a concerted effort to incentivize local homeowners or developers to do the same. For example, there are state incentives to convert from natural gas water heaters to electric. But I only discovered this by chance from an informed neighbor. The city's CAP talks about retrofitting 60,000 buildings within a few years, but there appears to be no budget funding to even publicize the benefits of doing this or the incentives available. Finally, I applaud the city's initiative to give away trees through a new program with Tree San Diego, but I hope the city will not rely solely on its residents to plant the 200 shade trees a year that are in its updated climate action plan. The city owns so many public spaces that could become beautiful and desperately needed breathing spaces between the increased density that we are obliged to embrace. I hope the tree budget will not disappear into trimming palms, but also planting new shade trees for our growing city. Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. My name is Patty Langen. I'm President of Buena Vista Audubon Society. Thank you for listening to the comments from community members and groups and your willingness to make positive changes to the VSR. Important improvements are still needed, though. The VSR still does not fully integrate all of the SAP goals and policies. We request confirmation that those remaining issues will be addressed through the future Biological Resources Protection Ordinance process. We also ask that the VSR Policy 5-8 incorporate the specific coastal sage scrub restoration acreage identified in the SAP. Next, as Diane said, I want to talk a bit about bird-friendly building design and ask that Policy 5-30 be revised to strengthen bird-friendly building design and collision prevention measures. I have previously spoken to the Commission concerning the nearly 1 billion birds in the United States that die from building collisions every year. It's just not sustainable. We urge the city to consider bird-friendly building design provisions from the Green Building Code. And while optional, those standards incorporating bird-safe measures through the project review process can be part of meeting climate goals as well. Developers push back with issues of added cost for specialized windows, but structural and lighting designs can be implemented with which reduce collisions and also conserve energy and save energy costs. Attempting to monitor bird collisions through incidental observations after a project has already been built is totally unreliable. There have been numerous scientific studies nationwide regarding building collision bird mortalities, and we ask the city to rely on that data. Next, we request that the city revise the VSR to restore all edge effect conditions that were used by the city under the MHCP. While some positive additions have been made, several important measures were removed. As Diane said, resident education on responsible pet ownership should be included, such as not leaving out pet food or water, discouraging the feeding of feral cats, and especially discouraging outdoor access for cats, which are another leading cause of bird mortality nationwide. So I thank you for your time and ask that you would consider these comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, Honorable Commission. My name is Mike Bullock, as I said before, and I told you where I live. Now I'm going to tell you what my title was when I retired in 2007 as an aerospace engineer. My title was Senior Staff Systems Engineer, and I do think climate change is a systems engineering problem, and that was my profession. A lot of good work has been done here over the years, and I appreciate that very much. And I think that the assertion that we're going to meet the climate requirement for 2030 is very impressive, and I don't think the people acknowledge that. My problem is SB 32 wasn't really, the background wasn't giving, and it's time for details. You know, SB 32 just didn't come out of the air. It is driven by climate science. And the scientists tell us we have two reduction requirements to avoid destabilizing the climate. The first destabilization requirement is 2030. That's very, very soon. Very soon. A lot of the speakers have been talking about things, and I don't think they're going to reduce emissions a lot by 2030, and 2030 is the big challenge. So the background of SB 32 was not given. Also, the fact that California has a plan to achieve SB 32. That's really good news. And the mitigation measures are clearly shown. And so you have to look at them and say, do they apply to what we're doing? One of them really does. The top three are double transit service. Everybody understands that, and that sounds good to them. Rather expensive, but that's one thing that has to be done. The other two have to do with pricing. Pricing of road use and pricing of car parking. Now, pricing of car parking, that's right here in our city. And I want to commend this city for having a statement that you're going to price employee parking. Wow, that took a lot of guts. But that does conform to what the CARB scoping plan says we have to do. I don't think we meet the requirement of SB 32 in 2030. I just can't believe it. And I'll tell you why. If you read the plan, and everybody should read that plan, it's a human survival plan. Do we value life? Then we read a human survival plan that was created. And it says 25% less driving by 2030. 2030 is very soon. 25% less driving, that's pretty big. That's why, and it says pricing is essential. I want to explain that word. Essential means if you do it, you got a chance. If you don't do it, you have no chance. The pricing has to be much better. The statement there is great, but it's flawed and it needs to be improved upon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Chair, Commissioners, Jimmy Knott, 127 Cherry Lane. I have 6 points. Hopefully I can get to them. 1, there's no preparation for aerial vehicles and services for micro-regional human or material drone transport. If you notice in the near future, in areas of the size of a home site, that is something that needs to be prepared for. It's not into the report. 2, missing was the vibrant plans like from the past for amenities. And what we need to do is advance that in protecting the San Luis Rey. And the most of the species have that plan and interconnections, as has been talked about. And from the developers, it needs to take and enhance that. 3, protections of the mobile home communities. Make the mobile home communities designated use sites districts. 4, quality of life mandates with metrics. That needs to be included in all levels here. It isn't. Like roadways ranking, it needs to be used for public safety, crosswalks as an example. Or let's say, make all developments with lanes in and out in order to improve traffic release relief measures. Also civic planning, like as an example, low-income areas, special services, medical, food, parks, and make sure that they're in each district of each town site, not in the city just in general, but spread out. 5, we have to take and consider source packaging, and we have to have the acceptance of return of the materials within the system. That way, it will reduce a lot of the climate problems that we have. And finally, if we can look at the ADUs and the potential for low-income housing offerings, that will also, but we need to also include the parking issues that are coming involved with that. Whew, I did it.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Oh, besides the point, I wanted to let you know that this meeting and the city council meeting was not publicized in the monthly calendar that's posted onto the city's website. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our registered speakers. If there are any other speakers within the gallery that would like to come forward, please state your name for the record and for the gallery, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And I do see one coming forward, so here we go.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Jennifer Jacobs Schaubel. I am an Oceanside resident and a wildlife biologist. As a biologist, I am concerned that the EIR for the general plan update relies heavily on future actions and deferred studies to address significant impacts to wildlife and habitat connectivity. Key protections, including the Biological Resource Protection Ordinance and wildlife movement studies, are all deferred until years after adoption of the general plan. In my letters, I pointed out deficiencies in the biological data and the lack of wildlife movement analysis. These deficiencies were acknowledged, but they may not be addressed for up to 2 years. CEQA requires environmental impacts to be analyzed with substantial evidence and enforceable mitigation, not postponed to future ordinances or future studies that do not yet exist. How will the results of these future studies be incorporated into the general plan? And what happens if projects come forward before those studies are completed? How will our natural resources be protected? Without these measures in place, there is no clear evidence showing how wildlife corridors, sensitive habitats, and regional connectivity will actually be protected as development proceeds. For these reasons, I urge the Commission not to certify the EIR in its current form. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there's any others that would like to come forward? I don't see anybody coming forward. Over to you, Chair. Also, actually, a quick note, I do have under item number 6, we have 2 speakers. So item number 6 on the agenda, which is the thresholds for determining significant greenhouse gas emissions. That's just so you know, there's 2 more speakers for that.
Okay. Do I have any questions on the dais on what's been spoken about today or now? Yes.
Chair Morrissey and members of the commission, what we were going to suggest is after the questions are formulated, staff would request maybe like a 10-minute break so that we can regroup. We have our consultants here to address many of the comments that were raised, and then after the recess, report back on the specific comments that were mentioned. So we can take that break at your pleasure. If you want to ask questions now, so we can also
take a break. Let's take a break.
But yeah, but if there is a question that you'd like to ask now that would be answered, or we can defer back and come back after the break as well. So we're open to whatever the commission would request.
Yes, City Planner Romero. There's been a few people who have brought this to our attention, and that. So my question is there language from the previous plan that has been removed that could protect the preservation of our oceanside farms?
Commissioner Dodds, I'm going to answer that question because I'm very familiar with this topic. So through our past planning efforts specific to South Morrow Hills, the question of the SALT program has come up many times as a means to preserve farmland in the South Morrow Hills area. And I know that we did study that program quite extensively. As a matter of fact, I mentioned Russ Cunningham earlier, the previous project manager, did a lot of study about the program. As a matter of fact, I think we even did a workshop specific to SALC with the community to discuss the program. At that time, and this goes back probably about 3 or 4 years ago, at that time, I think the takeaway that we had of that program was, although it is successful in some area of the county, particularly out in the east ends of the county where the land values are not quite as high for ag land, which is like true ag land out in East County, based on the conversations we had with folks who were experts in the program, the land values in South Morrow Hills weren't comparable to those other ag areas, and therefore there would be, under the current program, there would be very little incentive for folks to participate because there's much more land value here in South Morrow Hills than there would be, say, out in the far east stretches of the county. Now, I believe that there's been some changes to the SALC program in recent years, and so it is something that we are certainly willing to take another look at. What I would suggest is, we could include language in the cap. I have no problem doing that if that's, an action item that you would like to recommend. One thing I would caution, though, is under the prior version of the cap where that language was included, it included language about a commitment to find funding to preserve up to 250 acres of farmland out in South Morrow Hills. And I can tell you the city doesn't have the financial resources to buy 250 acres of farmland out in South Morrow Hills. Now, if there's a way to look for other funding sources that don't involve city resources, then certainly we could do that. But probably the most important point, and something to reiterate that was brought up at the beginning of this evening's presentation, is as a follow-up to the general plan update, we are committed to working on the South Morrow Hills Community Plan. And one of the primary goals, if not the primary goal of that plan, is to figure out a way to preserve agriculture. In my mind, that's when we would really be doing a deeper dive into the SALT program. If it's a valuable tool that has feet and it does have benefit to the area, then certainly we would have absolutely no issues in pursuing that program out in South Morrow Hills. But I guess the takeaway is it is something that we studied extensively in the past. Didn't look like it was really a viable option here. That's the reason I would imagine it was probably taken out. Most likely also because under that original language, there was talk of, as I mentioned earlier, preserving 250 acres by either using city resources or external resources. So again, it's something that we would, certainly take a look at again. We have no objection to it, I guess, is the takeaway. My only caution would be not to commit the city to a financial commitment. I believe I heard one of the speakers say that they would be okay with that. And that's probably the biggest thing I would have at this point, is if there's an expectation that the city is going to purchase 250 acres or fund the purchase of 250 acres of farmland out in South Morrow Hills, because that would be very expensive given the land values out there.
Well, it sounded like that they weren't looking for any type of financial commitment.
And if that's the case, then absolutely zero objection to including some language.
Let's find the language that we can put back in that will give them the support that they need.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Redgate.
That was my same point, so thank you. It was just about why we removed the language, and so you explained everything, but I think we should really consider putting it back in with those modifications.
Yeah, then I would suggest you include that in your recommendation to the City Council, and we can certainly bring that forward.
And I do want to note that the public did make comments about no financial, and they had public and private entities that were willing to go after those grants. So just wanted to take note. Thank you.
Let's take a short break. Let's come back at 10 after.
progress. Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
So Mary Sue, the public input is completed on item 5, correct?
Chair Morrissey, that is correct.
Okay, so, all right, we're going to bring it back to the dais, and if we have any questions on item 5, then we're going to handle item 6 afterwards. Then we'll
That's my
have a vote
understanding,
on
yes.
item 5. So that said, do we have any questions up here? Commissioner Gonzalez.
We're going to hear from staff? Oh, okay.
Yes,
I don't know if
so
you
I'm
were
gonna-
waiting for us to initiate something, but.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Oscar here in a second. So generally speaking, most of the comments were along certain themes. So either staff or our consultant team are going to respond to those comments. If there is anything that we didn't cover that caught your attention, please bring that to our attention and we'll respond to that as well. But we're generally going to go ahead and group them together. And then I also did want to follow up on a question that Commissioner Gonzalez asked earlier, which was a really good question. And I did have a chance to check in with some other staff here. There is the intent to have an ongoing implementation and monitoring program. We haven't figured out the fine details. But in speaking to staff who were involved very early on, there was an intent to actually have quarterly updates internally to go over the progress that we've made and report out publicly on those. It's a very good point. We don't want to just create a document and then forget about it.
I thought I saw something in an earlier version or
yeah, so we don't
something.
have the fine details worked out, but certainly we'll make sure that that's mentioned. The intent is mentioned when we get to City Council to have an ongoing implementation and monitoring program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Oscar.
Thank you, City Manager Borrego. With that, we're going to start with Andrew Beecher to address some of the CAP questions. Following Andrew, we're going to go with Lori Spar to kind of speak to the biological side of things.
All right, is this on? Thank you.
You're on.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Andrew Beecher. Oh, thank you. My name is Andrew Beecher. I work with Ascent Environmental. I'm a senior climate action planner. We're supporting the City of Oceanside with their climate action plan update. And this is to address the comments in respect to the climate action plan not meeting the targets for the year 2045 and 2050, while other jurisdictions do have climate action plans to do so. To give some more context on that, the requirements of AB 1279, they're the most aggressive state greenhouse gas reduction targets to date, and these were codified in the year 2022 through Assembly Bill 1279, and they state for a 85% reduction in anthropogenic greenhouse gases by the year 2045. So with this legislation being adopted in 2022, only a handful of the regional climate action plans in San Diego County have actually developed climate action plans that address these aggressive state reduction targets. Those are specifically County of San Diego, the City of Carlsbad, City of Solana Beach, and City of La Mesa. While other jurisdictions do have climate action plans, they were developed before or around the time that this state legislation came through, so they don't address this more aggressive codified state target. Within those 4 that currently have adopted plans for these targets, one of them does not show a pathway towards meeting that target. That would be the City of La Mesa. And then another one of those, City of Solana Beach, does not have a CEQA qualified climate action plan, which means it's not intended to be used in the future development review process. It's not evaluated in the California Environmental Quality Act, and it doesn't meet the same level of rigor. So really what that leaves is 2 climate action plans in the county that are intending to try to meet this target that actually show a pathway towards meeting this target. And similarly with the Oceanside Climate Action Plan, there's provisions for monitoring progress towards reaching these targets through regular updates to the citywide greenhouse gas inventory that will show year over year how emissions are trending towards reaching those targets. and additionally have provisions for updating the climate action plan at least every 5 years.
And just to provide some additional context, thank you, Mr. Beecher. I would like to note, Andrew did mention updates to the city's greenhouse gas inventories, which is essentially what sets the goalpost for the climate action plan. The city was actually notified of a SANDAG Sustainable Growth Implementation Plan grant award for updating our greenhouse gas inventory. We got notice of that back in December. We're one of 8 cities that put a grant application together collectively, and we expect that by the summer we're going to kick off that process. So we should have within the next year and a half a new set of greenhouse gas inventory data that we can use to update our cap. And I understand there was also multiple public comments on updates to the cap following the known impacts of SB 79. As we discussed earlier, I think with your recommendation to the City Council, that could be something that we can consider as well.
Okay. Do we have any questions of our experts here?
We still have our biological consultant to speak to the next item.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Lori Spar. I'm with Recon Environmental, and I've been supporting the city on the preparation of the EIR with the general plan effort. I wanted to address the wildlife corridor issue. We recognize that the baseline that the EIR has been using is based on mapping from the sub-area plan, which is quite old. It was originally prepared in 2005 and then updated in 2010, and those have been the maps that we've been using. At that time, the wildlife corridor that was shown was not included in those maps. So our maps, in recognition that there would be changes and that wildlife corridors could evolve over time, we have the VSR, which provides action items inclusive of the one to do a citywide wildlife corridor study. And that will allow us to identify any of these new locations that would require additional information. So I wanted to just sort of clarify that thought process. With respect to how the EIR approaches that, this EIR is intended to be a programmatic document. It doesn't analyze a specific project. It analyzes the plan as a whole, and the component of the plan is the commitment of the city to perform these studies, citywide vegetation surveys, the development of the biological resource protection ordinance, and the wildlife corridor study, all of which is considered as part of the project within the umbrella of this program. So it appropriately addresses issues in a way that's adequate. Edge effect?
I think there was one other item for development standards in regard to consideration for adjacent edge effects.
So the edge effects is an issue that is addressed in the EIR. As a result of potentially significant impacts, the general plan update includes standard conditions of approvals, which would be required for all projects moving forward, starting with adoption of the plan. It's not something that would be delayed until the time that the BRPO would be codified. And those standard conditions of approval includes the requirement to address edge effects. While those edge effects at this time does not include pet ownership or that type of educational steps, it is something that I think the city would consider in finalizing that ordinance to make it something that occurs throughout the city and regulatory.
Do we have any questions for our biologist expert? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Chair Morrissey, I also had one other comment that I wanted to address as well. There was a gentleman, Ali, I believe, who spoke about notification and so forth. So as I understand it, the piece of property that he's referring to is a piece of property on Vista Way, which is included in the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan, or was included. At the City Council workshop, inclusion of that property in the Smart and Sustainable Corridor was debated by the council back last year, and ultimately the council vote was to remove that parcel from the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan. So it's no longer included in the version that's before you. It shouldn't be a surprise to the property owner because they were there at that hearing. Now, granted, this hearing did come up pretty quickly, but that direction was actually set by prior city council action to remove that property from the Smart Sustainable Corridors Plan. And to answer their question, I mean, technically speaking, it can be added back in up until the next city council hearing when they consider the final plan, but that would be counter to the direction that they'd previously given on that specific piece of property.
Thank you for that clarification. If I see no other questions, then I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Ogden?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the Planning Commission Resolution number 2026 P06, recommending City Council certification of the final EIR for the Onward Oceanside project, adoption of the findings of fact and statement, overriding consideration and mitigation monitoring, and reporting per CEQA guidelines 15093. Also adopt the Planning Commission Resolution number 2026 P04, recommending the City Council adoption of the General Plan Amendment for Phase 2 of the Comprehensive General Plan Update, Smart and Sustainable Corridors Specific Plan, Climate Action Plan, Onward Oceanside per Government Code 65300.
Commissioner Dodds?
I wanted to make sure that we add as an addendum the language that was removed. So I wanted to make sure that we had the language correct, but add as an addendum to the motion. So how do we?
Well, Commissioner Ogden made the motion, so are you amenable to this addition?
So the language that was removed from the previous plan, I wanted to make sure that we had that added as an addendum to the motion to approve this, but I wanted to make sure that we had that language.
I think they're talking about SALT. Are you talking about SALT, and is that the part that they were saying that's they want to kick that down the road because it's Southmore Hills and you want to deal with that later? I think, is that what you're talking about?
It was for AF3 revisions of the language with taking out the financial commitment from the city.
That's correct. And so as I mentioned earlier, as long as we strike the language that suggests a financial commitment by the city, then we would be happy to include that in the recommendation that we present to council.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, just to clarify really quick, AF3 in the existing 2019 cap does give a specific acreage number. I just want to be clear on the motion if that acreage number, if there is a specified number. I know we're removing the financial component, or is it just to add general language in about considering the SALC grant program for acquisition of agricultural lands?
Yeah, it was just general.
Okay.
Commissioner Dodds, your call.
It was the general statement to protect the farmlands. Yeah, it's Southmore Hills farmlands.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
can we memorialize now what the motion is?
Oh, sorry. I can't get the microphone straight.
That's okay.
That's the motion.
That's the motion. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Justin, can you memorialize it? The part that we're adding?
Yes, we can memorialize it. So basically, if I understand the motion correctly, it would be to approve the resolutions with the recommendation that City Council request to add the SALC grant program for agricultural easements and acquisitions back into the Climate Action Plan update.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Justin. Do I have
I second.
Commissioner Redgate?
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Abel?
Yeah, just for clarification, when there's a motion on the floor, it has to be seconded, and then there's a motion to amend the motion, so we're.
Well, there was a motion, and I asked.
Nobody seconded.
No one
amended the
seconded, but I
motion.
asked if Commissioner Ogden would be open to amending his motion, and after a discussion, he is. So that's the motion, it's been read, and now do we have a second?
My motion is as Justin Gamble suggested. That's my motion. So it has been amended. So that's a new motion, I suppose, predicated on what was said.
Well, under parliamentary procedure, I would, because there's a motion, gets seconded, but if there's amendment to the motion.
It was never seconded.
Who seconded?
I didn't second. I was asking for the
No,
language.
we did not.
So okay, so you made an adjustment to your motion.
That's right.
Nobody seconded that motion, so.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
Thank you.
We do.
Please vote.
Oh, wait, hold on. Then there's discussion, and then there's voting. That's the parliamentary procedure. I don't know. I thought during the discussion, we would discuss what would happen with some of the general plan and all that, but we're moving right to a vote.
Well, and if it doesn't pass, then we'll discuss it.
No, you discuss the motion. That's
right.
the parliamentary procedure under Robert's Rules of Order.
Well, we cleared up your first issue, and there was a motion that was amended and it was seconded. Let's discuss it. Do you have a question? Why don't you, I don't see you on the, go ahead, you got the floor.
What are we doing? I'm sorry.
Discuss it. Is there something you wanted to discuss?
There's a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
And it's been seconded.
Okay. Now we're going to discuss it. Oh, okay. All right. I just had some questions for Jonathan. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Because there's a lot of information going on in this general plan. I just want to know, as far as the protected bike lanes and the smart, sustainable corridors, who pays for that?
So in the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan, there is a section of that plan that gives different financing options to do those types of street improvements. So it can vary. The options that are on the table would be, the city could fund those types of improvements through its capital improvement program, which, we're struggling to keep up with our CIP. So I mean, in all transparency, that may be tough. But one of the other options is to also come up with developer impact fees specific to those developers that want to develop within the corridor and require them to pay a fair share towards those corridor improvements. Or one of the other options I believe that's mentioned in the plan as well is like a business improvement district. So you can actually set up district boundaries and assess those property owners to fund those improvements. But those are all things that will be looked at. I think one of the other things that's important to mention as well, the city recently did receive a grant to prepare its mobility plan. And as part of that mobility plan, the idea of where those bike lanes should be installed, the design of those bike lanes, and then also a further deeper dive into the funding of those improvements would also be looked at through that mobility plan.
Thank you. One more question. Yes. The mobile home parks, I didn't see where, or if you could tell me where to look, where it would say it won't uproot a mobile home park in the smart corridors. So I think there is a particular one near Crouch, so.
To my knowledge, none of our mobile home parks are included in the boundaries of the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan. So they wouldn't.
Yeah, earlier.
Well, La Salina is not included within the boundaries of the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan. Okay. So anyway, so generally speaking, the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan is to focus future higher density residential development largely on properties that are either zoned commercial or multifamily residential as it exists today. I think there's also a few industrial sites that are thrown in there as well. But we were very careful in the general plan update to preserve our lower density neighborhoods and, more importantly, our mobile home parks, because our mobile home parks are subject also to our rent control protections as well. So we always take extra care to protect those parks from development to the extent that we can.
And one question. The spillover in the neighborhoods that near the corridors, what are we doing to address that?
Well, it's kind of hard to say right now until we actually see development take place and really get a better sense of what, if any, impacts those developments may have on the adjacent areas. You know, it's really hard to speculate right now. I mean, I can't really give a blanket statement in terms of how they would be addressed. I mean, certainly parking is always a concern, you know, when it comes to this housing, especially when developers have the ability to waive our parking requirements, which is, you know, an issue that we struggle with. But the fact of the matter is, you know, we're largely precluded by state law in terms of the parking standards we can impose on a development project. I know you guys all know this as planning commissioners because you deal with it very often on density bonus projects, but it's really difficult to speculate. I mean, every neighborhood is different. The impacts of each project are different because some developers choose not to waive parking standards and will actually develop something that meets code even though they could theoretically ask for a lower standard. So it's really difficult to say.
So for example, the new project of, place off Crouch, what's been done with that in the, because there's a lot of spillover right now. What are we doing about that?
Yeah, so I don't remember the specifics of the Crouch project that you're talking about, Ocean Creek. My recollection, though, that one was actually parked on the higher side in terms of what we usually see for density bonus projects. So obviously it hasn't been occupied yet, so it's probably too soon to say what's going to happen there. You know, but we have limited tools available at the end of the day. I mean, we do have a permit parking program, but one of the issues with our permit parking program is you just kind of chase the problem to the next neighborhood, and the next neighborhood wants permit parking. So it is a challenging. I mean, honestly, the best solution is to disincentivize folks from driving. I mean, that's the intent of having transit-oriented development, and you know, the fact that the Crouch project is right next to a Sprinter station. You know, hopefully because of that, people will be inclined to use transit and be less reliant on cars. I mean, that's not always the case, but that is the theory behind transit-oriented development.
That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner April. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. I'm curious to hear from some of the other commissioners as to other changes that are not included in the current motion that we're entertaining. Adding back the coastal sage scrub and the bird-friendly design, some other things that we've heard from the community, and just hearing your comments or concerns regarding those.
Commissioner April.
First time I really heard about bird design. It's kind of interesting because I see parrots by my house sometimes. I don't know what that entails. It sounds expensive, but it does sound important because there are a lot of birds. That's all I have to say about that part of it. So,
Commissioner Anthony.
The one thing that I wanted to address, which was brought up, was the acreage of the coastal sage plant. Having that language in there, you did take it out as far as the numbers. If we could add those numbers back in there.
Yeah, and for clarification, the reason that those numbers were taken out is because that 145 acres is based on the old plan, and as you've heard tonight, we're actually going to be updating all of our mapping. And so it's very likely that that number is going to change either upward or downward. It could even go upwards. So, you know, I think once we complete that mapping exercise is probably the more appropriate time to come up with the target figure, and we will be reporting out on that once we update that wildlife habitat. I mean, we may be selling ourselves short at 145 acres. There may be a need to pay for more. And again, we would be most likely seeking some sort of grant funding for that as well, because, you know, I know that was one of the issues with the original cap and one of the reasons that it wasn't adopted to begin with. And I think that was shared earlier, was because there was a financial commitment that the city would be acquiring, you know, hundreds of acres of land. And at that time, the city's decision makers didn't want to make that financial commitment. But there could be other opportunities out there, including grant funding, to acquire land for those purposes, including, you know, some of the recent state propositions as well that have funding attached to them.
Mary Sue, so I think a while ago, Commissioner Ogden made a motion, and I believe it was Commissioner Dodds seconded that motion. All right, let's vote. No.
Let the record show the motion passes 6 yes, 1 no.
Okay. Item 6 is consideration of guidelines and thresholds for determining the significance of greenhouse gas emissions for evaluation of future development projects under the CEQA Act. The threshold is consistency with the CAP update. The guidelines include implementation tools for project review, including a consistency checklist and GHG emissions efficiency thresholds. And the applicant is the city. Disclosures. Commissioner Dodds, can we start on your end, please?
Read the staff report and was part of the meeting with the city planner Romero.
Commissioner April.
Got the review from the city planner, or forgot your title. City planner? Okay, sorry.
Same. Briefing and the reports.
I was at the meeting with Director Romero.
Likewise, staff report and the briefing.
Staff report, briefing, and community conversations and calls.
Without being redundant, briefing.
Thank you, Justin.
Hello again, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. Well, let's talk CEQA. I will try not to be very dense about this. Very high level, this item is related to the previous item that was discussed in relation to the CAP update. Right. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt resolution number 2026-P07, recommending that the City Council adopt guidelines and thresholds for determining the significance of greenhouse gas emissions pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15064.7. All right, so I'm going to cover some proposed development review guidelines that will help the city determine the significance of a future discretionary project's greenhouse gas emissions under CEQA. So these guidelines propose local thresholds of significance that support the implementation of the CAP, which is, as we know, part of phase 2 of the general plan update. So this action would establish for the first time locally specific CEQA thresholds of significance for general use for the City of Oceanside for greenhouse gas emissions. So this action, if approved by the City Council, would create procedures for development projects to show consistency with the Climate Action Plan update through the use of a checklist tool and numeric thresholds. So under state law, under the CEQA guidelines, lead agencies such as the city have the option to establish qualitative, quantitative, or performance standards to determine a project's environmental impact. So these are termed thresholds of significance under state law. Generally, a project is compliant for a certain environmental impact if it falls under this threshold, and it's determined to have a less than significant impact under CEQA, and no mitigation would be required. If a project exceeds the threshold or cannot comply with it, it is determined to have a significant impact, and formal mitigation and monitoring reporting is required. So while CEQA provides recommended thresholds for many different impact areas like hazardous materials and wildfire and biological resources, Cities may adopt our own local thresholds for general use, provided that they are adopted through a public process, they're adopted via resolution, rule, or ordinance, and they are supported by substantial evidence. So because the CAP update was analyzed under the final EIR for the Onward Oceanside project, I mentioned this in my previous presentation, it's considered a qualified plan for the reduction of GHGs under CEQA. So therefore, the CAP can be used to tier and streamline future greenhouse gas impact analysis for discretionary development projects. So this will be accomplished by demonstrating consistency with the Climate Action Plan's emission reduction measures. So this constitutes the primary threshold of significance. It's essentially, is the project, a development project, consistent with the Climate Action Plan? This is the primary and most efficient pathway to utilize the streamlining benefit that CEQA offers cities that have an adopted CEQA qualified CAP. So simultaneous with the CAP adoption, we're introducing an updated consistency checklist as the screening tool to demonstrate how a project can incorporate certain features as conditions of approval. And this text here is directly from the resolution. It's a bit long, but essentially that a project that is consistent with the Climate Action Plan would have a less than significantly cumulative, considerable contribution to climate change impacts. So under the primary threshold, there are two pathways that can be followed for a discretionary project applicant to demonstrate consistency. So the first is using this new checklist, the checklist only, where certain features that are based on the project's type, its land use, its location, and service population would be conditions of approval where they're not otherwise required by existing ordinance or regulations. The second pathway is for projects that cannot comply with measures in the CAP checklist. And this is where we have quantitative emissions that kick in, quantitative thresholds of significance for greenhouse gas emissions. So regardless of whatever compliance pathway is used in the development review process, all projects are expected to complete the checklist to the extent feasible. So again, this figure is directly from the resolution as well. So the values shown here constitute the quantitative thresholds of significance, where a project cannot use consistency with the Climate Action Plan alone. So these types of projects must complete a project-specific emissions analysis, so essentially a study of what their proposed emissions are going to be over the operational lifetime of the project. And rather than consistency with the CAPS measures alone, this approach examines the cumulative emissions on an annual basis from the project. A further explanation of this approach is described in the guidelines that I'm going to show here in the following slides. So to implement the thresholds to be enacted by the resolution, staff have developed standardized guidelines for determining the significance of a project's emissions. The determination begins by identifying one of two compliance pathways. Pathways are based on whether the project will be operational prior to 2031 and if it's consistent with the general plan's land use and zoning designations, as those emissions would have been accounted for in the CAPS growth projections. Projects that are not consistent with underlying land use may provide evidence on how their project generates emissions that are less than or equivalent to those assumed to be associated with that land use. The first step determines a project's eligibility for streamlined review using the checklist. If it's eligible, in the second step, the applicant completes the checklist to demonstrate how it's consistent with the CAP updates measures through inclusion of certain operational and design features that are designed to reduce its emissions over the operational life of the project. So in the presentation I gave on the CAP update, I mentioned this, that discretionary projects can comply with the checklist. Projects that do comply with the checklist that are determined to basically have not a significant impact under CEQA, not a cumulatively significant impact. The checklist has been tailored to both private development and also city-initiated projects. So the city we're holding ourselves to the same standard as private development projects would be in the use of this screening tool. And the applicable features to each project are codified in the conditions of approval. I want to reiterate too that this tool, the checklist, can only be used for projects that are going to be operational before 2031, because this goes back to the discussion we had about how the CAP cannot meet the 2045 and 2050 goals, so it could not account for those emissions beyond that date. So this tool, the checklist for streamlined development review, It is only for use for those projects coming online before those years. So the checklist is itemized. Similar to the CAP update, it's itemized by emission sector and includes certain actions based on the development type. So we have a couple examples here that were previously described in my earlier presentation. So things like building energy use requirements, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, providing bicycle and pedestrian access for transit-oriented development. So for the projects that are not eligible for streamlining under the CAP and CEQA, we've developed scaled quantitative emissions thresholds that are in the resolution. That was the table I showed earlier. And they're based on the project's annual emissions on a service population basis. So service population is the total number of people that are living and or working at a project site. So this normalizes the project's emissions. So it's essentially a measure of how efficient the site design is at reducing annual emissions on a per person basis. So it levels the playing field between different sizes of development projects. So the proposed quantitative thresholds are listed in 5-year increments, and they're benchmarked to the CAP's major milestones, or emissions reduction milestones, and they're aligned with the state legislative targets. Projects must demonstrate that they can meet the values through a project-specific GHG analysis, and they have to incorporate additional mitigation measures in circumstances where they can't demonstrate compliance. So essentially, the projects that use the checklist up until 2031, for a project that has to answer no, any of those items, if they can't do it, or if they're seeking like a general plan amendment or a zoning amendment, they'll be held to the secondary set of thresholds. And in order to do that, they need to conduct their own site-specific greenhouse gas emissions. The thresholds are backed by substantial evidence as required by CEQA through technical documentation showing the values are based on the CAP update's locally specific GHG reduction targets. So in summary, staff recommends the Planning Commission consider adopting Resolution 2026-P07, recommending that the City Council adopt the guidelines and thresholds for determining significance of greenhouse gas emissions pursuant to CEQA 15064.7. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin, do we have any questions for Justin? I see none. Do we have any yes, Commissioner Ogden. I'd like to make a motion. Well, I think we may have public comment. 2. I knew we had 2. See? All right, fire away.
Thank you, Chair Morrissey. Yes, we have 2 speakers this evening. Again, come forward. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. State your name clearly for the record and for the gallery, please. Mike Bullock, you're up first.
Thank you. Mike is gone, so Jimmy, fire away.
Okay, thank you very much. Chair, Commissioners, Jimmy Knott, 127 Sherry Lane. I would like to inform you that some of these issues are currently under court review as part of the Eddie Jones court case against the City of Oceanside and the developer of their case. Now, if we took this case and looked at it, or let's say the important factors as they would relate to greenhouse gas, let's say for this type of operation that Eddie Jones provides, or proposes to provide, or battery plants, or saltwater, or oceanic resources extraction plants, or any other type of processing that would be proposed. Let's say that into the Eddie Jones plants, as they have a certain transportation figure. They also have environmental effects, weather, that they have air, water, etc., like that. This does not really look at the pathways that are involved. It barely mentions it. And there are viewpoints that are contrary to what may be presented by one party. This needs to be balanced out, as the court case is pointing out, which is not being brought up. Also, let's say that there is a project that goes through the process of being reviewed and then approved. In the future of any development, there are waivers, exemptions, and variances that can affect a development. We need to put blockades against any waiver, exemption, or variance because they would affect the greenhouse gas plans or effects from that plan. So any future modification would have to be reassessed for each and every development. This is not being addressed or being considered. There are potential after effects and impacts that need to be looked at that are not being addressed here. Also, I go and I reiterate what I have said before in the previous slide, that we're not looking at other potential situations of future ideas of like transportation drones and how they would have impact in equalizing some of the new innovations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
That concludes our speakers that signed up previously. If there's anyone else who'd like to come forward. I don't see anyone coming forward. Over to you, Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Ogden, did you have a comment?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Planning Commission Resolution P2026-P07, recommending the City Council adopt guidelines and thresholds for greenhouse gas emissions pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15064.7.
Thank you for your motion, Commissioner Ogden. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Dodds. Please vote. Can you, okay. I'll know you want to speak if you show up. Okay, Commissioner April. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. What was the Eddie, where did he go? Oh, there he is. Was the Eddie Jones project considered in your plan?
Not specifically, but as that is ongoing litigation, I'll defer to the city manager on that. But to answer your question directly, that was not a factor in the development of our guidelines and thresholds.
Did everybody hear the question? Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a guideline that's being brought forward now. It wouldn't have applied to the Eddie Jones project. And certainly, I don't think we took the Eddie Jones project into consideration when we developed the guidelines, if I understand things correctly. So, yeah. I'm quite frankly not sure what the correlation is.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and we have a second.
Wait, hold on. Sorry. The correlation would be a lot of pollution that's gonna come, right? I mean, that's what the gentleman was saying, correct?
Yes, but the guidelines only.
Look, testimony's over, so make your statement, please.
Yeah, I'll let Justin answer that question.
Yeah, this action establishes a new threshold, a locally specific threshold. So the Eddie Jones case is essentially irrelevant here because it would set a new set of guidelines during the entitlement and project application phase that we would be applying with the adoption of these thresholds by the City Council.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Commissioner April, you good?
Yeah.
Okay, please vote.
Let the record show the motion passes 7-0.
Okay. I see nothing on discussion items or miscellaneous action items, so we come to city planners' reports. Vice Chair Anthony, do you have a report tonight?
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Redgate?
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Ogden?
Yes, I do. I'll keep this short. But first of all, I'd like to thank city staff for the yeoman's work they've done over the past 2 years, especially in the last 2 months, for doing a yeoman's job. In my opinion, there was a lot of work and a lot of midnight oil. I realize that, especially as I sat through the workshop, realizing how much work was involved in doing that. Thank you very much. I have another comment too. There was about 18 months ago, one of the city council people brought a motion to the city council asking to reconstitute the planning commission. What the motion was to ask all the planning commissioners to resign. And the reason for that was, number one, diversity, and number two, that city council person felt that they did not know what was happening at the planning commission level. That was brought to the city council. That motion was denied, 3-2 vote. As far as diversity is concerned, I think this commission is far more diverse than the last one was. I thought the last one was diverse anyway, so I think that's been taken care of. And secondly, and more importantly, the comment about I don't know what's happening at the planning commission level was, in my opinion, disingenuous, and it was not accurate because KOCT TV, these were public meetings, and I think if I was a city council person, I would know what's happening on the planning commission as well. So I have spoken to all the city council people, and I have told them that I personally would meet with them once a quarter to discuss the planning commission, what's happening in the planning commission from my perspective. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. I don't want that to come up again where the city council does not know what's happening in the planning commission meetings.
Thank you, Commissioner Ogden, for that. Commissioner April.
I don't have anything.
Okay, Commissioner Dodds.
Nothing to report.
I have nothing to report, so City Planner Romero.
No report.
Well, then I think that does it for tonight. So this meeting is adjourned.
I'm just kidding.
Recording stopped.